My name is Ali, I'm a doctor and YouTuber.
I'm Taymor, I'm a data scientist and writer.
And you're listening to Not Overthinking,
the weekly podcast where we think about happiness, creativity, and the human condition.
Hello and welcome back to Not Overthinking. Taymor, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. This is actually the first time we've tried recording an episode in the car. So we're currently driving back from the Cotswolds after a weekend with the boys. So we have a brand new mic set up. So I hope this works out nicely and there's not too much noise and things. Yeah, I've had a nice weekend. How about you?
Yeah, it's been a pretty pleasant weekend. We drove from Cambridge to the Cotswolds for around 3 hours on Friday night. We arrived at our cottage at midnight, and then we've been spending the last couple of days with the boys, going out to different places for breakfast, lunch, dinner. It's all been very wholesome, and we even went for a brief, maybe 2-mile walk, which is pretty good going, I thought.
Yeah, so what are we talking about today?
So today we are joined by our friend Sahel, who happens to be in the car with us. And I thought it might be interesting to talk about the value that we get from traveling abroad and specifically living in different places for an extended period of time. So this is something that I'm thinking of doing potentially in the next couple of years. I'm toying with the idea of moving to America just to see what it'll be like. And both you and Sahel have lived in different countries for varying degrees of time. So I thought it might be interesting to talk about the value that you got from it and how you think it's changed you and whether you actually recommend it for different people. But before we get started, Sahel, can you introduce yourself to the podcast, please?
Yeah, hi guys. I'm Sohail. I went to university with Ali, and for my third year I actually moved to America and stayed there for a couple of years. I took a job there for a while, so that's a move that I made during university. Might be interesting to talk about today.
Yeah, and as you guys can tell, Sahel has picked up the American accent within just 2 years of being there.
Cool. So I mean, the first thing I'm quite curious about, Sahel, is that, so you sort of mainly grew up in Pakistan, right? So you sort of went to most of schooling there and then you came to the UK for university. Mm-hmm. What was that sort of shift like? Was that the first time you'd spent an extended period of time living in a different country?
It was, yeah. After 18 years of life in Pakistan, I moved to the UK for university. And I mean, obviously, moving to a new place gives you that chance to really break out of your routine, break out of the social bubble that you've been in, and try to redefine what kind of person you are.
Oh, nice. What was, did you have it in mind that I'm going to reinvent myself at university or something?
Yeah, I guess like most people I did.
Yeah? What were the particular things that you sort of wanted to change? Or who did you want to become?
I wanted to do more of music. So
okay.
I always had an interest in playing guitar, playing piano, but I didn't really do much of that before university. So I wanted to seize that as an opportunity to, try to do more performances, try to do more jams.
Okay, yeah. So just kind of put yourself out there.
Exactly.
With regards to music. What about socially? Did you want to sort of change your personality in any way? I mean, Ali sort of said on the podcast that he wanted to be more sort of extroverted and sociable and stuff, and I think to an extent I was the same.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. You obviously get the chance to try various societies, you make new friends in your college and in the wider university. So yeah, it does give you a chance to define not just the people you usually spend your time with, but also I think that has a big influence on your own personality over time.
Yeah, sure. But going from sort of secondary school to university, I mean, it seems like, for example, Ali had a very clear mindset of essentially, all right, I was a massive nerd at school. I don't want that to carry on. I need to be really,
really cool.
Yeah. I'm guessing it wasn't quite as extreme as that. I think that's one of the more extreme sort of shifts that people try and essentially have. But what was that for you, if anything?
Yeah, so before university, I barely did any sports regularly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but as soon as I moved to the UK, I thought, let's just pick up every single sport I can get into. So
nice.
I tried rowing, I tried lacrosse, I tried football, frisbee, anything I could take part in. And I mean, I don't know, I don't think I kept most of them up for long, but it definitely gave me the chance to try and define myself again.
Okay, nice. So in school you were kind of nerdy, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And you wanted to be less nerdy. Yeah, I think to be honest, most people kind of go through that.
Yeah, and it sounds like what Tame is fishing for is for like Sahil to have some sort of internal social change between secondary school and university. But Sahil, it sounds like for you, it sounds at least right now that were mostly happy with your personality, but it was more kind of the activities you were doing in your spare time that you wanted to change.
Yeah, I think
would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I would say that, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Where did this happiness with your own personality come from, do you think? That's something I'm very curious
Where
about.
can I get some of that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I had more of a motivation to change like the day-to-day things that I was doing rather than my personality. Obviously, not to say that I'm happy with everything the way it is, but I think it was the external stuff that I was focusing on when I came to the UK for the first time.
What was it like being sort of so far from home? Because I think I've always felt like the UK is kind of nice in that, you know, everything is a few hours drive away, and so like it's a good balance in being at university in the UK. If you live in the UK, it's a good balance of like, you know, being in a new place and sort of away from your family and parents and stuff, but you do kind of also have them there and you're not like completely detached. Whereas I found that when I've sort of spent time living in the US, you do actually feel completely detached, and it's a very different feeling, and you don't feel quite as grounded. I find it hard to articulate, but yeah, what was it like sort of moving so far away for so long?
I think when you move away, your life can go one of two ways. You can either try to remain very attached to people you've known wherever you came from and call your friends every day and just try to keep yourself in the same kind of social group, almost in denial that you should be integrating with wherever you are now.
Right. Yeah.
Or you can just try to forget about doing that day-to-day kind of calling everyone and keeping up with your old friends and try to spend more time investing in integrating where you are and making new friends and getting used to a new lifestyle. And I think I focused on the second one. I mean, you do that as part of moving to university anyway.
Yeah.
But I think that is really what has the value in moving abroad for yourself.
Okay, so mostly like trying to sort of fit in with a new culture and kind of integrate there, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, even if the culture is not different, if you're moving from the UK to the US, you'll see some differences, but even if the culture isn't very different, I think it gives you that chance to have a fresh start in a way.
Yeah.
Come up with new activities to do. I mean, when I went to the US, I was like, okay, maybe I'll take this chance to be the guy who goes to the gym every day, be the guy who, I don't know, plays music or does performances every now and then, you know? And I mean, it doesn't really make any sense that moving to a new place would cause that for you, but I think it's a psychological thing that if everything else around you is changing, you find it easier to change as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've definitely found that.
So one thing that I think that everyone is concerned about, like whether you're moving to university in the same country or whether you're, actually moving abroad, is this fear of how will I make friends? To what extent was that a worry for kind of both of you when you moved to a completely different place for the first time?
I think for me, it's it can be quite daunting, but you have to find an in. Like when I came to university, I made loads of friends in the Pakistani society. And that was a good way to kind of get an in to begin with, and then you feel more comfortable meeting people outside of that tiny group. When I went to the US, I did the same thing. When I moved within the US, from Massachusetts to California, I moved with a couple of other friends, and we rented a house together, and that really made sure I was able to kind of ground myself in a social circle while still being comfortable enough to explore and make new friends and find new activities to do.
Yeah, it's nice to have like a stable base of like a couple of people that you kind of know.
Yeah, I find like the more as in like after university, it becomes a lot harder to sort of just join the Pakistan Society or whatever. But I've recently joined the local badminton club at my gym, and I'm just like always surprised at just how many of these like local community activities there are outside of university. And it seems like when we were living in Southend and we joined the local badminton club there, it seemed like all those guys were all mates with each other from having gone to this badminton club for like a 10-year period. And they would go for like, drinks afterwards, just like hang out and have barbecues and all that stuff. And that kind of gives me hope that actually the whole trying to find friends as an adult thing isn't too hard, provided you're okay with making the effort to go to these sorts of kind of community group gatherings.
Yeah, but I mean, one thing I found with like making friends through activities and stuff is that I don't think I've ever sort of gone from having someone who for example, like the badminton club thing. I don't think I've ever gone from like, I see this person at the badminton club to us actually becoming like close friends and like going on holiday together and stuff like that. I think most of my friendships they're sort of like we'd go on holiday together, which I think is like a good heuristic for, I don't know, I guess how close you are with someone or whatever. Most of those kinds of friends have just come from like lots of proximity from having like lived in close quarters at university or like gone to school together. I don't know if I've ever actually gone from like seeing someone at some activity for like an hour a week and then progressing all the way to the end game of going on holiday together,
Then I suppose there are obviously middle grounds between that. So it wouldn't be completely unfeasible to, host a dinner party for like 6-7 people and invite, that one guy that you get on really well with the badminton and be like, hey, I'm holding this dinner with a few friends. Do you want to come if you're free? That sort of thing. And then once you've taken the friendship outside of that context, then it becomes a more regular thing, right?
Have you actually ever done that?
As in through work, yeah. So there's colleagues that I was working with this year and last year where we'd only see each other at work, but then like for the few of them that I really got on with well, we would progress to be like, hey, we're having a board game tonight at my place with some takeaway, why don't you come over? And then 6-7 people would come over. And some of those have lasted as friendships, and I can see myself going on holiday with them at some point when our rotas coordinate properly.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
And I think that's like the key. Like if you have the initiative to go to a group gathering and then have the initiative to bring people back to a different context outside of that group gathering, that's when you've sort of jumped that chasm almost. And that's when you can start sort of treating it as an outside of work friendship. Otherwise it's just like, oh, these are the people I play badminton with, or these are the people I work with.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So a big part of the whole, people say that, traveling is great because it broadens your horizons. Like, to what extent has moving to England and then moving to America for 2 years, to what extent has that actually broadened your horizons, whatever that means for you?
I think the way this really is different from just going on holiday for a couple of weeks is if you actually go and live in a place for a few months and you you create this social circle that you hang out with, the kinds of things that you tend to discuss when you're around friends changes as well. So when I went to MIT, for example, it was all about making a startup, making the next big thing, making a new business or a new tech or something. That was the thing everyone was talking about.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And that just changes your thinking, even if you're not that much of an entrepreneur, you start thinking like that.
Yeah.
Whereas when I was here in Cambridge, I think people tend to be a lot more, less practical, but more philosophical, Questions like, what impact does religion have on my life? Or, what do you think about division of classes or politics, or more philosophical things like that.
So at Cambridge, people were just like sitting around thinking about stuff.
Yeah.
And so when you were there, you kind of did more of that. But then at MIT, everyone was like trying to start the next big startup, and so you kind of got into that mode a bit.
Yeah, exactly. I think that really influences how you think as a person.
Yeah.
and potentially impacts like what are your goals in life as well, you know?
So I think that's quite similar to our the idea that we've talked about a couple of times of kind of like expanding your box, and I guess what you're saying is that once you're surrounded by people who are all for whom something is so normal that it's just talked about all the time, like the idea that you might one day start a business and kind of make it big or whatever, that then becomes part of your box and it begins to feel like something totally normal.
Exactly.
And that's like sort of the experience I've had with the various podcasts that I listen to, because it's all with people who've started businesses or who are YouTubers or whatever, to the point that it becomes so normal to think about, okay, obviously I'm going to be a YouTuber, obviously I'm going to start a business. Whereas if you don't have that kind of exposure, it's not something that you would ever really think about. Do you think there's any fundamental difference between being plugged into the podcast of a certain frame of mind and being plugged into people in real life having that frame of mind?
I mean, if you follow a podcast religiously, it probably would have the same impact on your life.
Okay, that's good to know. So it means that I don't have to move abroad to broaden my horizons. I could just listen to various podcasts of the sort.
Yeah, I think the main impact of moving abroad on me has been making new friends and being part of a new social circle, which you can do without moving as well, but I think moving just is the catalyst that forces you to make that change.
Okay. How about you, Tim? Your few months in America, has that broadened your horizon in any way? Because like for Sahel, it sounds like, and I guess this is probably true for you as well, like when people say travel broadens your horizons, they, at least in my head, the stereotypical image is I'm going to a country that is totally different to my own, so I can hang out with people who are totally different to me. Whereas moving from Cambridge to MIT, for example, you're not really hanging out with people significantly different to you. They just happen to live in a different place and maybe have a slightly different way of thinking about certain things. But broadly, they're all probably fairly privileged. They're all probably, you know, probably matched on a lot of different spectra, if that makes sense. So was that a similar experience for you moving to California?
Yeah, so I'm kind of, I'm a bit skeptical of the whole, like, our travel sort of an uncritical sort of take of, like, travel broadens your horizons or whatever. Because for the most part, I mean, yeah, when I've sort of mostly traveled to places, you just like see some cool stuff, you do some cool stuff, you hang out with your friends who you're there with, and that's about it. Like there's nothing particularly horizon broadening about it. But I found that the horizon broadening really just comes from, at least for me, it's kind of just come from living with other people who you haven't lived with before. And so my first kind of stint in the US was when I did an internship in California after third year. And so when I did that, I was kind of living with with 5 other dudes. There was like 6 of us. We're all from like the same university. We're kind of moving over there to work on one of the guys' companies, essentially. And I think there wasn't actually much sort of personal growth or anything like that for me during that 3-month period, because you know, there were like 6 of us. We're all from the UK. We're all kind of like, yeah, we're all like pretty similar.
Basically massive nerds.
No. I think we're all like weird in different ways, which was pretty cool to see. But a lot of it was just like us sort of, you know, working during the day, hanging out with ourselves in the evenings, and occasionally doing like little outings and things. And I think we're also all kind of living separate lives, in that, you know, we'd all be like working together during the day, but then after that, you know, I'd occasionally go and hang out with my family in the Bay Area, and like, you know, one of the guys was going on some Tinder dates every now and then. Like, we kind of sort of do our own thing and occasionally hang out. Whereas I think when I was living in San Francisco last year, I think that was a bit different, because there were just sort of 3 of us in the house, kind of living together and sort of working together. And I think our lives were a lot more intertwined. And so I think there was more personal growth there, because I think I more intimately sort of understood the way those other 2 guys kind of think and live their lives. And I think that is where the sort of horizon broadening comes in. And I think like probably like the biggest sort of takeaway from that trip was that it kind of helped me see sort of the the sort of big difference between sort of Western culture and the sort of like Pakistani culture that we've kind of been brought up in, where I think Pakistani culture is very like sort of communal, if that's the right word, whereas I think Western culture is a lot more individualistic. And so just from like living with these guys and seeing how they approach different situations and stuff, it kind of made me think like, whoa, that's pretty weird. Like I wouldn't, we wouldn't do that at home or something, because it would be,
What's an example of that?
Okay, so for example, let me think, one sec.
On that note, that microphone that you've got between the two of you, I feel like it's attached to some kind of bag.
Yeah.
Which is attached to the car, and so any shaking and vibration of the car will affect the audio quality. Is that?
Oh, okay.
Is that not what's going on?
That might be what's going on.
I feel like one of you should just hold it up in between you and have it closer to your mouth so that it picks up a better sound, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
In fact, if you could even kind of pass it between you and basically speak into it, with it like, a couple of inches from your mouth, I think that would be significantly better than having it lying on a car that's vibrating and rattling like hell.
Okay, yeah, so I guess one example is that we went to...
Sorry, before you do that, check that the gain is not going off the charts while you're talking with it that closely.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, cool. Sorry, continue.
So yeah, when we were in San Francisco, we went on a little holiday to Mexico for a couple of weeks, and there were like 4 of us that went. This was like the entire company, and we were kind of working from there and kind of doing a bit of holiday stuff. And one of the guys kind of, on our sort of days off, we took like a few days off where we were just going to do like sightseeing and just have some fun rather than do any work. And one of the guys just kind of wanted to do his own thing. He just wanted, he was on holiday or whatever, he just wanted to like walk around town on his own and then sit around and read his book on his own or whatever. And I found that really bizarre, because I don't think that's something that would really happen in the sort of environment that we've grown up in, because I think, the way we've sort of grown up, if you're sort of with other people or like you're on holiday with other people, then it's like a communal thing and you do things together rather than like, everyone doing whatever they want, and if it happens to align with someone else, then 2 people do it together. But I was just a bit struck by the sort of the more individualistic approach rather than the more sort of collectivist approach to a lot of things. And I think that was really helpful, because it kind of made me see that in a lot of situations, the more I think the more individualistic approach actually makes more sense. Whereas previously, I wouldn't consider doing lots of things because it would seem weird from like a collectivist point of view. Do you guys know what I mean? Does that make any sense now?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. It definitely gives you that chance to explore how other people view social situations. Yeah. So yeah, I think I agree with that.
Yeah, and that's sort of like I've got a friend who goes on a lot of cruises with his family, and he says that one of the best parts about having a cruise ship holiday is that everyone can do their different things. So he's got loads of siblings and kind of mum, dad, grandparents, whatever. Like to him, it's sort of actively weird if they all go on holiday together and do the same stuff, because that across those generations and across the different realms of interest, they're not really going to find activities that they all enjoy doing. And so when they're on this cruise ship, they would have like dinner and stuff together, and they would go on excursions together just to kind of explore a museum, which is a very kind of universal activity. But otherwise, one person can play table tennis all day every day, one person can join the choir, one person can just sit by the side of a pool reading a book, the dad can just like sleep in bed, and like everyone has their stuff that they're doing, while also kind of collectively meeting up occasionally for like excursions. And I think that's a pretty good model for a holiday, in this kind of more individualistic kind of mentality.
Tim, has that changed how you view life and how you do things? Are you more individualistic now that you've been exposed to that?
Yeah, I think so. I think previously there would have been lots of situations where I'd feel compelled to do something kind of out of social obligation. And we've talked about this on the podcast before. Whereas now I just kind of be like, actually, I don't really want to do that, and so I'm not going to do it. And it's really quite freeing. But obviously I think there's a good middle ground of like living as an individual versus living as part of a collective.
Yeah, especially with like family stuff, I think that for example, let's say you're going to a funeral of someone that you don't really know very well, but like your mum knows them very well, then you might feel inclined to say, oh well, there's nothing in this for me, but actually at that point it's probably worth prioritizing the needs of the collective rather than the needs of the individual.
So Sahel, when you were living in the US, like, were there sort of big cultural differences like that between you and the people you were living with? What were they like?
I don't know. I think in university, people are sort of malleable enough. People are open to different ways of thinking. I don't think I saw much of a clash of cultures, as you might expect. But maybe that's just because of the university environment. Maybe if you're older and you're working, it's different and it might be harder to fit in. But I think in university, people are generally accepting, and you don't really have to make much of an effort to kind of fit in and make new friends.
So if you hadn't spent sort of like a couple of years living in the US and you kind of just stayed in the UK, do you think your sort of outlook on things and the way you think and stuff would be broadly the same, like, or do you think there was something about being in that, in an American environment with those people rather than the UK that actually changed you in some way?
I think I am different now, but I think it's not because of US culture. I think it's just because of the friend group that I was a part of. So if people were more into thinking about who's going to make the next Facebook, who's going to do the next big thing, I think that did have an impact on me. But I don't think it necessarily has to do with the culture of the new place. It's just the fact that you're changing cultures, changing the things you talk about on a daily basis that really has an impact on you. Did you find that to be the case, or was it more of a culture shift for you?
I think for me it was more of a culture shift, like a cultural difference between me and the people I was living with. They happened to be American, but I imagine I could have gotten that with plenty of non-Americans too.
So it sounds like what you guys are saying is that when you move to a new place or visit a new place for an extended period of time, there's probably some element of the general milieu or the general culture of the area that shapes you in some small way, but actually it's the people that you hang out with for extended periods of time and possibly live with that has a far higher effect on your own psyche. And so you might be moving to, I don't know, Vietnam or something, but if you're living for 6 months with your same group of highly educated, privileged startup friends, you're probably not going to change your perspectives that much. Whereas if you were to move to Vietnam and instead, do that thing where people live and work on a farm for 6 months, that is likely to significantly change your own perspective.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. And actually, I think I've pinpointed one of the main ways in which I think living with other people can sort of change the way you do things, which is that I think when you're living with other people, you get into like lots of discussions and or arguments about things, and that might be like actual discussions where you're intentionally trying to like figure something out, or you're sort of intentionally disagreeing on something, or that might actually just be an argument where something needs to get done, there's some disagreement or something, you have like a little argument about it. And I think each person has like a very different kind of mode in sort of arguments and disagreements, and like people argue and disagree in lots of different ways. And so I think just having lots of arguments and disagreements with lots of different people kind of helps you navigate the sort of disagreement landscape and kind of understand how to do that more fruitfully. Because for example, Ali, if you and I have like a disagreement or argument or something, it's very different to like if me and Mimi, our mom have like a disagreement or argument. And like I think having lots of arguments with the guys who I was living with kind of changed my sort of style of arguing / disagreeing with people. And I think that is always really interesting and really fruitful.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think like obviously the style of like if you and I have a disagreement, it would be very combative in its approach, and that will be fine because we know that it's all good. But for example, if I have a disagreement with Molly, for example, I know that sort of she would have like we'd approach it in a different way to kind of like just like launching sort of like arguments at each other, which probably wouldn't be the most fruitful way of resolving that. And I think kind of living with her has definitely taught me more about how to have productive disagreements with different sorts of people, if that makes sense.
So broadening your horizons in this case means taking disagreements as a learning opportunity, learning about other people, learning about new ways of thinking. Is that what it means for you?
Yeah, I suppose that's one aspect of broadening horizons. And I guess you get that from any amount of extended contact with people that you disagree with on some things about. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a different country.
Yeah, I think there's actually something profound here, because I think like to productively disagree or productively argue with someone, there is a level of empathy that's required, and there's a level of like sort of goodwill that's required, and that are practicing that muscle of actually understanding how this other person who thinks differently to you, where actually understanding where they're coming from and trying to sort of navigate the path to like some, mutually beneficial state. I think that is actually like a really good sort of brain muscle to exercise. And it's like in the process of like having a productive disagreement with someone, I think that is when you actually start to, that's one of the best ways to actually kind of understand what they're about and how they think about things and where they're coming from. Whereas I think outside of that realm, outside of that, I guess you talk to people, you share life experiences, and learn about how they were raised and stuff, and that's always interesting and kind of helps you understand their water a little bit. But I do think like productively disagreeing with people is a really good way to understand them and sort of new ways of thinking.
I think like on this group holiday, this low social optionality group holiday we've just been on, and that we're on the way home from, I think I understood a few of the lads a bit more than I did before, because a few of the lads are in a position where they've, for example, quit their job recently and are looking to start something new. And from my perspective, it seems like a total no-brainer that obviously you would just start a blog and then start writing on the side, then build an audience, and then build an email newsletter, and then maybe start a YouTube channel, and then at some point that would pay dividends further down the line. And sort of just like trying to figure out why they're not doing that, and like really doing it from a place of not like, obviously my way is the only way, but more like this is one path. Why, like, what is stopping you kind of from going down this path? What am I missing from this picture that makes it seem so obvious to me, but kind of from the position that you're in, it's not like, it doesn't seem like immediately the right thing to do. And I think that brings out a lot of interesting conversations, because now, at least from my perspective, I'm actually trying to understand as opposed to trying to convince, if that makes sense. And I think that's a good place to be, where sort of a disagreement becomes a case of understanding rather than a case of bringing the other person around to your point of view. Which might happen eventually once you've understood, once you've modeled their brain effectively, but until then, step one is to understand.
Yeah, so do you now understand why he's not making a blog and making a YouTube channel and doing podcasts once he's quit his job, or?
Yeah, a little bit more. I think the answer to that is like fear in various different forms that we kind of explored in depth while we were walking on this foggy hillside. But I think for me, it's helpful to know that people have that sort of fear about this sort of stuff, because having been in the arena for so long, as it were, I almost can't empathize with the initial fear of starting out that a lot of people seem to have. So I thought that was quite helpful for me to understand, and hopefully gave him some insights as well.
So, do you feel like you understood anyone better after this trip?
I think I definitely learned a thing or two about the people I was on a trip.
All right, guys, we've got to keep it PG.
We'll let those things stay in the Cotswolds.
So in terms of like asking from a purely selfish perspective, I'm considering this move to America for a couple of years to maybe do a master's, maybe even kind of go there for residency. This is all very much a very tentative plan right now, but in both your experiences of kind of having done the moving to a different country, do you think that it's, quote, worth it, whatever that means?
I think it's a no-brainer. I think in every respect, it can only add to your experience and add to your portfolio. It can never take away from it. And I think there's no real opportunity cost that you would miss out on if you were to go away for a couple of years. You
What
would
do you
make
mean by opportunity cost?
I mean, let's say you spend 2 years in America. You would make new friends. I think you're thinking of doing a master's.
Yeah.
You would get opportunities to collaborate with people in America on your YouTube channel or in your podcasts. So it opens up new avenues and new opportunities. And I don't think you're trading much against it were you to stay in the UK. I don't think there's many different things that you would have done in the UK in the same amount of time that would have added that much value. So I think it's a no-brainer. I think it would definitely only add to your experience and your portfolio if you were to go away for a couple of years.
Okay, cool. And I guess you feel that way about kind of your moving to the UK and then moving to America, that you feel that net it has only really been positive. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, Payne, what about you? I feel like you've got a different stance on this because you've been trying to talk me out of going to America for 2 years.
I don't think I've been trying to talk you out of it. I just,
Or is it more like you're skeptical of the value of a 2-year master's?
I am highly skeptical of the value of a 2-year master's. I think there's almost certainly a better way you can spend your time and money. But I think
Such as what?
Sorry?
Such as what? I'm curious as to like if you were in my position, what would you do instead?
To be honest, I don't think I'm in a good position to answer that because, like, I don't really intimately understand, your domain, like all this medical stuff or whatever. I really, I don't intimately understand that, and so, I don't think I can give a good answer to that. But I think, for me, it's kind of like the thing we had an episode of a couple of months ago where we were talking about like whether you should buy a new iPhone or not. And the conclusion we kind of came to was that a purchase is going to be a lot better if it sort of takes you from 0 to 1 in some like category. So if you don't have a phone and then you buy a phone, that's going to be a much bigger sort of change on your life than if you already have a camera and you buy a slightly better camera, right?
Okay.
And so I think like the marginal value of like one more year or like one more unit of doing something you've kind of done before is very little. You've been at university for 6 years, man. Like, going to a different university, which is going to be pretty similar culturally for another 2 years, that just seems completely ridiculous to me. It just seems like it will have very little extra value as an experience. But I'm all about sort of going from 0 to 1 in terms of like an experience. And so actually one of the things that, aside from like the productive disagreements thing, I think the other way in which like traveling sort of broaden your horizons is if you get the chance to actually sort of live with another family. But I think like family life is a weird sort of aspect of, I guess, existence in that in general, you only ever have a sample size of one. You get one family, you kind of live with them, and that's it. I mean, you might go around your friends' houses, you might have a sleepover or something, so you might get like a small glimpse into how other families kind of operate and kind of interact, but I think it's very rare. I think like, certainly nowadays, the sort of lives that we're living, it's rare to like get an intimate look into how other families operate, and I think going from a sample size of 1 to a sample size of 2 in terms of like what a family could be, that is actually huge. And I spent about this is a very short period of time, like not long enough to sort of properly get into it, but I spent like a week with some of our family in Arkansas for Thanksgiving. That was super interesting. Like I'd never really spent time with that side of the family before, and just kind of seeing how they interacted and operated was very interesting. And so I think like, trying to take your family sample size from 1 to 2 would be really good, but I don't think taking your university number of years at university sample size from 6 to 8 is any use at all. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I think my main, I'm more sort of like with Sahel on this, in that I think the main value out of going to America for another 2 years of university is not the fact that it's 2 years at university, but it's the fact that it's 2 years in America, plugged into an existing social network at university, plugged into where it's very easy to do things like join societies and find opportunities and stuff, which is the sort of stuff that is like supercharged when you're at university and harder to do when you're just living in a random city. That would be kind of my
sure, but like my whole point is that it's going to be the same stuff all over again, dude. It's going to be, wow, you're going to join the Pakistan Society over there. Well done, mate. It's going to be exactly the same. Like, it's not going to be new stuff. I agree that university and like being a student is amazing because it gives you a sort of social network right out of the door, one of those two. But it's broadly going to be very similar stuff, and it's going to be a university mindset. It's not going to be that new. And yes, it certainly is an easy way to kind of have friends rather than going to a place and not having any friends. But that's not the point. I think like spending a couple of years in the US or another country is great. I think doing it with like the university thing is less good. I think if it was like a completely different country, I don't know, like going to like China or Japan or something, then like the university thing could still be interesting because it gives you a social, a sort of an immediate social network that is genuinely very different to what you would have had before. And like when you're in a brand new country with a completely different culture and language, I imagine having like an existing social network can actually help you broaden sort of other parts of your life. But in the US, it's not going to be that different.
Ah, interesting.
Okay, I'll be real with you.
All right,
I think the university thing is a total cop out, just so that you can say that, oh yeah, I'm going to the US to do this thing that has a label, which is a master's degree from some like well-known university. It's nice to be able to say this thing rather than if you tell someone, yeah, I'm just going to the US for a couple of years. I don't know what I'll do. I'll a bit of this, bit of YouTube, bit of this, bit of that. That's a much less legible answer, right? And that's kind of scary. It's scary to like face that of like, oh, I guess I'm completely free to do whatever I want for 2 years, and hopefully I can do something interesting and useful with that. That's a lot scarier than like, oh yeah, I'm going for the master's degree, and then I'll do a lot of stuff on the side. Like the master's degree kind of gives you some weird validation that it shouldn't. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. It's sort of like having a job gives you some weird validation, and then you can do whatever you want on the side, but at least you sort of got the job. Whereas it's a lot harder staring into the void of actually I'm just going to be completely unemployed and just do whatever I want.
Yeah, I think this master's thing is a cop out. It's sort of running away from real digital. Real life.
I think that's a good place to end this. We've just arrived at the services in Reading, and we're going to grab a cheeky vegan burger from KFC. Apparently it's really good. Hang on, I feel like we have to be on the westbound end of this. We're on the wrong side. Okay, right. We'll figure it out. While we're heading to the westbound end, I'm not sure how much of the podcast you listen to, but we like to end with like an insight of the week or anything like that. Do either of you have any insights that you've come to this week? Also, how on earth do we get to the westbound side of this motorway? Oh, it's quite a detour. Okay, we could just screw the KFC and just have M&S. Okay, hang on. Right, should we do our insights and then we'll?
Hey, where are you guys going?
Okay, and then this one that you posted on the group?
Yeah, that one.
Oh, I mean, I could just click on it. Oh, okay, cool. I've clicked on it, and 13 minutes away. Right, let's go.
It's 20 minutes.
That's a bit silly here.
Inside of...
I thought I had a good insight last week that I posted on my email newsletter that night. So I'm going to cheat and use that one. That was from a blog called Raptitude, which is very good. And it was about the idea that when you're doing stuff, you should be like fully immersed in the doing of the stuff. And he quotes from, I'm getting a real sense of deja vu. I'm not sure if I mentioned this in last week's podcast. Oh well. He quotes from this like 1990s manual on how to spring clean your house. And like a big part of spring cleaning the house well is not like the mechanics of doing so. It's the fact that you are fully engaged in this task of spring cleaning your house. And he says that when he started doing this with cleaning and with other things, just like fully focusing on the task at hand, then it made everything just more enjoyable. And for me, I've had, I would be very tempted to think of stuff like doing the dishes or doing the laundry as being a quote waste of time. And therefore I'd listen to a podcast or listen to an audiobook and stuff while doing those things. But now this week and last week, I've started kind of paying more attention to it and doing it like intentionally. I definitely feel like I literally said
this on the last
same thing last week. Oh,
but I think it's a good reminder and all that stuff.
Yeah, nice. So, there we go. That's all right then. And then you said something about like washing your hands and stuff.
Yeah, washing your hands.
Yeah, mate.
Last week I said
I still don't do that.
I said the thing about a new toothbrush. How a new toothbrush like touches your gums in ways.
Mate, when you're as much of a content creation machine as I am, you lose track of when you said stuff. I also feel like a lot of times when I have conversations with people, then I find myself doing a spiel that I've already given
doing
before.
a bit from the podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I feel really bad and weird doing that because it doesn't feel authentic. But like the bit exists and it's relevant and it's like what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's like the most efficient way of getting it across, given that you've already rehearsed it.
Yeah. You thought about it before, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right, we'll end it there.
Should we read a review? If you guys can bring one up on the phone.
I actually can't find my phone right now.
Can't find it.
So why don't you read a review from the podcast?
So why don't you go on the iTunes store and leave a review of the podcast first, and then read a random one while you're there. Make sure you rate it 5 stars.
The app is called Podcast.
While you're doing that, Sahel, I just want to let everyone know. So when we started out at university in first year, I stalked Sahel on like the Cambridge Freshers 2012 group, and he had this like a profile pic of him in like his school uniform playing a guitar, and I was like, damn, this guy seems really cool. And then I saw that he also had a YouTube channel, and on your YouTube channel you'd posted piano covers of like Pirates of the Caribbean and stuff like that you'd played in your school assembly, and I was like, damn, this guy seems legit, I want to be friends with this guy. And then when I met you on that first Paxsoc event, I was like, right, that's the guy, I'm going to be friends with him. So I've been plotting our friendship for several months before we actually met. I just wanted to let you know.
Did you know that story before Sahel?
I knew bits of that story, not the extended version.
That story was a bit.
Nice.
They're all really good reviews. I wanted a bad.
Yeah, you won't find any bad. We actually take the bad reviews down, so don't bother.
So here's a review by broaden, who says, "Love it. Such engaging and intellectual discussions."
It's a nice review. Thank you to broaden.
We'll make dua for you.
And thanks for listening, everyone. Thank you, Sahel, for joining us. It's been great having you on the podcast, and we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.